Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be kind of exploring something that might seem a little surprising at first. It's the connection between Cushing syndrome and HIV.
Yeah, it's definitely a link that a lot of people might not be aware of.
Right, so before we get too far, let's just quickly recap what Cushing syndrome is for anyone who might not be familiar.
Sure. So basically, Cushing syndrome is what happens when your body has way too much of the hormone cortisol for an extended period of time.
Okay, so too much cortisol for too long.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. And this can happen naturally, right? Like it's not always caused by something external.
Exactly. There are cases where it develops naturally. But what we're really focusing on in this deep dive is how certain medications, especially those used in HIV treatment, can actually increase the risk.
So that's the surprising link we're talking about. HIV medications potentially leading to Cushing syndrome.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So let's say someone is living with HIV and managing it with medication. What are some of the things they should watch out for? What are some signs of Cushing syndrome that they should be aware of?
Well, one of the most noticeable changes would be weight gain. And it's not just any weight gain. It's often very rapid and concentrated in certain areas like the face and abdomen.
So like someone might notice their face looking fuller or rounder, almost like a
Yeah, some people describe it as a moon face.
loon face. Okay. And I imagine that kind of rapid weight gain could be pretty alarming for anyone. Are there any other physical changes that might be a red flag?
Definitely. You might also see thinning skin that bruises easily, sometimes even purple stretch marks.
Oh, wow. So these are some pretty drastic changes. It seems like it would be hard to miss them.
You would think so, but sometimes the symptoms can be quite subtle at first. Or people might attribute them to something else entirely.
I see. So it's not always so cut and dry. So what's the takeaway here? What should people do if they're experiencing any of these changes?
The most important thing is to talk to your doctor. Any sudden or unexplained changes, especially if you're living with HIV, should be discussed with your doctor right away.
Got it. So open communication with your doctor is key.
Absolutely. Early detection is always the best approach.
Now, we've talked about the symptoms, but I'm curious about how Cushing syndrome is actually diagnosed. What steps does a doctor take to figure out if someone has it?
Well, the first step is always a thorough review of the patient's medical history.
So understanding their background, any existing conditions, things like that.
Exactly. And then we'll discuss all the medications they're taking, and I mean everything. Prescription drugs, over-the-counter medications, even supplements.
I bet some people are surprised to hear that supplements could be relevant.
Oh, definitely. But it's important to have the full picture.
Okay, so after the medical history and medication review, what's next?
Then we'd likely order some specific blood and urine tests.
To check for those elevated cortisol levels we talked about earlier.
Right. There are a few different tests we can use. One is a 24-hour urine cortisol test. Another is called a dexamethasone suppression test.
And those help us see how the body is responding to cortisol.
Exactly. And depending on those results, we might also recommend some imaging scans.
Like what kind of scans?
Typically a CT scan or an MRI. Those help us look more closely at the adrenal glands and the pituitary gland, which are both involved in regulating cortisol.
So we're looking for any abnormalities in those glands.
Precisely, we're trying to pinpoint the source of the problem.
It sounds like a pretty thorough process.
It is. Diagnosing Cushing syndrome can be complex. It's like putting together a puzzle.
And sometimes those puzzle pieces can be tricky to find.
Absolutely. But it's important to be patient and persistent. The sooner we can get a diagnosis, the sooner we can start treatment.
Okay, so let's talk about the link between HIV medications and Cushing syndrome. We know certain HIV medications can increase the risk, but I'm curious about the why. Why do these medications have that effect?
So there are a couple of things at play here. First, we know that some HIV medications, like corticosteroids, are often used to manage inflammation. And corticosteroids are known to affect cortisol levels.
Oh, okay. So they can cause those levels to rise.
Right. And then to make things even more complicated, we have another class of HIV medications called protease inhibitors. And these protease inhibitors can actually make the effects of corticosteroids even stronger.
Oh, wow. So it's like a double whammy.
You could say that. It's like turning up the volume on those cortisol effects.
So for someone who's taking both a corticosteroid and a protease inhibitor, their risk of developing Cushing syndrome could be significantly higher.
Exactly. And that's why understanding these medication interactions is so crucial.
It's not about avoiding these medications altogether, though, right?
No, not at all. These medications are essential for managing HIV and preventing its progression.
It's about being aware of the potential risks and monitoring closely for any signs of trouble.
Exactly. That's why that open communication with your doctor is so important.
Making sure they have all the information about your medications and any changes you're experiencing.
Absolutely. The more informed you are, the better equipped you'll be to manage your health effectively.
So far, we've been focusing on the potential risks, but it's important to remember that these HIV medications also have tremendous benefits.
Absolutely. We don't want to scare anyone away from taking their medication.
Right, it's all about understanding both sides of the coin, the benefits and the potential risks.
And making informed decisions with your doctor.
Exactly. So if you're living with HIV and taking medications, stay vigilant. Communicate with your doctor and don't hesitate to ask questions.
Couldn't agree more.
Early diagnosis is key.
Absolutely. The sooner we can catch it, the better the outcome.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about the symptoms, the diagnosis, and the link between HIV medications and Cushing syndrome.
And we've emphasized the importance of open communication with your healthcare provider.
Exactly. But we're not done yet. In part 2, we'll delve into the treatment options for Cushing syndrome and explore what John's journey might look like.
Stay tuned.
All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into Cushing syndrome and HIV. You'll remember from part 1 that we left off with John, our hypothetical listener living with HIV, who's started to notice some of those red flags we talked about, like the weight gain and maybe some easy bruising. And he's talked to his doctor, gone through some tests, and unfortunately, he's received the diagnosis of Cushing syndrome.
So now the question is, what happens next?
Right, exactly. What are John's options? What can he do about this?
Well, the good news is that there are a number of treatment options available, and the approach will really depend on John's individual situation.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Definitely not. Each case is unique. But one of the first things we'll consider is whether any of John's medications are contributing to the problem.
So going back to that link between certain HIV medications and Cushing syndrome that we talked about in part 1.
Exactly. We know that some HIV medications can increase cortisol levels. So if John's taking one of those medications, we might need to adjust the dosage or maybe even switch to a different medication.
And I imagine this is where those newer HIV medications that we mentioned earlier might come into play. The ones that are less likely to interfere with cortisol.
You're right. There are some newer antiretroviral therapies that generally have a lower risk of causing Cushing syndrome. So switching to one of those might be an option for John.
Okay, so medication adjustments are definitely on the table. But what if those aren't enough? What if John's cortisol levels are still too high even after adjusting his medications?
In some cases, surgery might be necessary.
Surgery? To do what exactly?
Well, remember we talked about the adrenal glands and the pituitary gland being involved in regulating cortisol?
Yeah.
Sometimes a tumor on one of those glands can be the root cause of Cushing syndrome. So in those cases, surgery to remove the tumor might be the best course of action.
That makes sense. But I'm guessing surgery isn't always the first choice.
No, usually it's reserved for situations where medication adjustments haven't been effective or if the tumor is causing other health problems.
So it's kind of a last resort?
In a way, yes.
Now, we've talked about medications and surgery, but what about lifestyle changes? Could those play a role in managing Cushing syndrome?
Absolutely. While lifestyle changes alone might not cure Cushing syndrome, they can definitely help manage the symptoms and improve overall health.
Okay, so what kind of lifestyle changes are we talking about?
Although diet is a big one. For someone like John, focusing on a healthy diet is key.
So what does that look like in practical terms?
It means cutting back on processed foods, sugary drinks, and excess salt. Basically all the things we know aren't good for us anyway.
Yeah, the usual suspects.
Right. And on the flip side, it means eating plenty of fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains, all the good stuff.
The stuff we should all be eating anyway.
Exactly.
And what about exercise? Does that play a role?
Absolutely. Regular physical activity can help regulate cortisol levels, improve mood, and just boost overall health.
It doesn't have to be anything crazy intense, right?
No, not at all. Even moderate activity like walking, swimming, or cycling can make a difference.
So finding something you enjoy and can stick with.
Exactly.
Now, we've talked a lot about the physical aspects of Cushing syndrome, but I imagine there are also some emotional and mental health challenges that come with it.
You're absolutely right. The physical changes associated with Cushing syndrome can really take a toll on self-esteem and body image.
Like the weight gain and the changes in facial appearance.
Exactly. And then the hormonal fluctuations can lead to mood swings, anxiety, and even depression.
So it's important to address the mental and emotional aspects as well.
Definitely. Having a support system in place is crucial.
Like family, friends, a therapist.
Exactly. People who can provide emotional support and understanding.
Now, back in part 1, we briefly mentioned HIV RNA testing. I'm wondering how that fits into the bigger picture of managing both HIV and Cushing syndrome.
So remember, HIV RNA testing is a very sensitive test that can detect the virus itself, not just the antibodies.
Right.
And this is particularly relevant in the context of Cushing syndrome because some of the medications used to treat Cushing syndrome, like corticosteroids, can actually weaken the immune system.
Ah, I see. So if someone's immune system is weakened, it could potentially make it easier for the HIV virus to replicate.
Exactly. That's why regular HIV RNA testing is so important for people who are being treated for Cushing syndrome. It allows us to monitor the HIV viral load very closely and make adjustments to the treatment regimen if necessary.
So it's all about staying one step ahead and catching any potential issues early on.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive.
Okay, so aside from medication adjustments, surgery, and lifestyle changes, is there anything else John can do to manage his Cushing syndrome effectively?
Well, ongoing monitoring is really important.
What does that involve?
It usually involves regular blood and urine tests to check those cortisol levels. And depending on the situation, John might need periodic imaging scans as well to keep an eye on those adrenal and pituitary glands.
So it's not just a one and done kind of thing. It's an ongoing process.
Exactly. And I think it's important for Jen to remember that managing Cushing syndrome is a journey. It's not a destination.
A journey with ups and downs.
Right. And his treatment plan might need to be adjusted along the way. But with open communication, a good healthcare team, and a proactive approach, John can definitely live a full and healthy life.
That's a really reassuring message.
It's all about taking control, being informed, and working in partnership with your healthcare providers.
And that's what we've been trying to do in this deep dive. Give people the information they need to take charge of their health.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive. We've explored the treatment options for Cushing syndrome, talked about the importance of lifestyle changes, and emphasized the role of ongoing monitoring.
And we've highlighted the importance of addressing the emotional and mental health aspects as well.
Absolutely. But we're not quite finished yet. In part 3, we'll shift gears and look towards the future. We'll explore some of the latest research and advancements in the field of Cushing syndrome and what those might mean for people like John.
So stay tuned for that.
Welcome back to our deep dive. It's the final part of our exploration of Cushing syndrome and HIV, and we've come a long way with John, our hypothetical listener. He's gone from those early warning signs all the way through diagnosis, and we've even talked about some potential treatment approaches. So now I'm really curious about what the future holds. What's on the horizon for people like John who are living with Cushing syndrome? Are there any exciting new developments, new research?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a lot happening right now in the world of Cushing syndrome research, and it's a really, really exciting time to be following these developments. One area that's particularly promising is the development of new medications that can actually target cortisol production in a more direct way.
Oh, that's interesting. So instead of just managing the symptoms or maybe addressing like the underlying cause, like a tumor, if there is one, these new medications would actually go straight to the source and control the cortisol levels themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Right now, a lot of the treatments we have, they either kind of indirectly reduce cortisol production or they focus on things like removing a tumor, if that's what's causing the problem. But researchers are now working on medications that can actually directly inhibit the enzymes that are involved in making cortisol in the first place.
So it's a much more targeted approach.
Yeah, much more targeted.
Wow. Do you have any examples of any of these new medications that are showing promise?
Yeah, so one example is a drug called osilodrostat, and it works by blocking a specific enzyme called 11-beta hydroxylase, which is it's a key enzyme in that final step of cortisol production.
Right.
And clinical trials have actually shown that this drug can effectively lower cortisol levels in people with Cushing syndrome, and it's already been approved for use in some countries.
Oh, wow. That's really encouraging. It sounds like it could be a real game changer for people who haven't had success with other treatments.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any other promising medications in the pipeline that we should be aware of?
Yeah, there's another one called levoketoconazole, and it works in a pretty similar way to osilodrostat. It also inhibits cortisol synthesis. And the results from the clinical trials have been really positive so far. So researchers are pretty optimistic about its potential.
So it sounds like there's a lot of hope on the horizon.
Definitely. And one of the really exciting things about these new medications is that they could offer an alternative to surgery for some patients, especially for those who either aren't good candidates for surgery or maybe just prefer a less invasive approach.
Right. Not everyone is comfortable with the idea of surgery.
Yeah, exactly.
But of course, no medication is without its risks. Are there any side effects or potential downsides to these new drugs that John and his doctor would need to weigh?
Oh, of course. Like with all medications, there are potential side effects.
Yeah.
And some of the common ones that have been reported in the trials for these new drugs, they include things like nausea, fatigue, headache, and sometimes adrenal insufficiency.
So it's really important for John and his doctor to have those open and honest conversations about the potential benefits and the risks.
Yeah, exactly. It really goes back to that theme of shared decision-making that we've been talking about throughout this whole deep dive.
It's a partnership.
Yeah.
Now, aside from new medications, are there any other kind of like cutting-edge advancements in the treatment of Cushing syndrome that you're particularly excited about?
You know, there's a lot of interest right now in a technique called focused ultrasound therapy. It's still pretty early in terms of research for Cushing syndrome, but the initial results have been really promising.
I've heard about focused ultrasound being used for some other conditions, but I'm not really sure how it works. Could you break it down for us?
Yeah, sure. So basically, you can think of it as using sound waves kind of like a magnifying glass. You focus the sound waves on a very specific point, and that generates heat. And so in the case of Cushing syndrome, we could actually use focused ultrasound to target the overactive cells in the adrenal gland or the pituitary gland, the cells that are producing too much cortisol.
So instead of having open surgery, which can be really invasive and require a lot of recovery time, this is potentially a much less invasive option.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very precise way to either remove the tumor or at least reduce its size, and it doesn't involve any cutting.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating technology.
But you said it's still early in terms of research?
Yeah, so more research is definitely needed to really determine how effective and safe it is in the long term for Cushing syndrome. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's exciting to see how technology is being used to develop these new treatment options.
It really is.
Now, we've talked a lot about medications and even some pretty high-tech treatments, but I'm wondering, are there any lifestyle factors that can either influence how well those treatments work or maybe even help to manage the symptoms of Cushing syndrome? I know we've already talked about diet and exercise, but are there any other lifestyle changes that could make a difference?
Yeah, diet and exercise are definitely really important. But managing stress is also crucial because stress can actually trigger the release of more cortisol. So finding healthy ways to cope with stress, whether it's, mindfulness techniques or yoga or spending time in nature or anything that works for you can be really helpful. And also getting enough sleep is really important because when we don't get enough sleep, our bodies tend to produce more cortisol.
Oh, so those late nights are really working against us.
Yeah, exactly. So sleep is definitely crucial.
It's a good reminder for all of us, really, regardless of whether we have Cushing syndrome or not.
Yeah, definitely. Taking care of ourselves is important.
So those healthy habits, diet, exercise, stress management, sleep, they really can make a difference.
They really can.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into Cushing syndrome and HIV. We've learned about the symptoms, the diagnosis, the treatment options, and even taken a look at what the future holds. And I think a really important takeaway from all of this is that knowledge is power. The more you understand about your body and your health, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions and advocate for yourself.
I couldn't agree more. It's all about being proactive and taking control of your health.
Absolutely. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. There are resources available, there are support groups, and there are healthcare providers who are there to help. So if you're looking for more information or if you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out. We hope this deep dive has been helpful and informative. And until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay in charge of your health.